Live today with Major Mike Stambaugh, part of the Battlefield to the Boardroom discussion. And the whole idea that it's not about saying thank you for your service, it's about welcoming home our service members. So people who have deployed, we got combat stories, we got tragic stories, we got departure stories, we got funny stories. Everything here is on the page, Military Leadership Methods, and then you can join us in the group Battlefield to the Boardroom if you'd like to see past discussions and stuff. But enough of that. On to Mike Stambaugh, one of my favorite human beings. Mike, thank you for taking time to chat with us today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, and so you were a Marine. You are a major. You got out now a couple years ago. We won't.
One or two.
We won't age anybody in that conversation. I found this photo of you sitting in the desert of Kuwait with your command. Yeah. This was your company going across into the initial invasion of Iraq, right?
Yeah, that was a couple of years ago. Yeah, that was us, my company staff there. I think you're in there somewhere. Your ugly mug is right down in front as normal, right in the center of attention. So, but yeah, that's all of us getting ready. I think at that point in time, Saddam Hussein had started kind of tossing some scuds, and we were just really hopeful that he was aiming for us because they were pretty inaccurate. So if he was aiming for us, then we were pretty sure it wasn't going to hit us. But that's there. I guess what? So put that picture back up again. Was
yes,
that Gunny Craig? Then Gunny Craig, later Sergeant Major Craig.
Lieutenant A to Z next to him.
Yeah, Lieutenant Funasavage, Paul Funasavage, who was our liaison officer. Todd Zink, the XO, that's my ugly mug next to him. First Sergeant Berrigan after that, with his...
Who's now Sergeant Major Berrigan.
Yeah, then Sergeant Major, but sporting his nifty mustache there. That's Staff Sergeant Strickle.
Yep.
Lieutenant, was he lieutenant then or captain?
No, he was captain. Captain Stolle, yeah, the 81s.
81's platoon commander, and then your ugly mug there as well from Cat platoon. So good looking bunch, man. We look good.
Yeah.
We were 10.
Yeah, and that was your crew, your command. So that was part of 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines, RCT-1, General Mattis, ultimately in charge of all that for the movement north.
Yeah.
And I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit. I mean, you were the commanding officer. You were taking a couple hundred Marines, a bunch of vehicles. We were heading off to war. But you had kind of a unique situation to the rest of us in that you had a family. You had, I think, one daughter at the time, right? Michaela was 4 or something. And
she was just a couple of months old at that point. But yeah. So, but I don't think that was terribly unique. I mean, a lot of us had families. Some of us did, but most of us did, I think, at that point. Yeah, that was, I think that's always an interest. It's always a difficult time saying goodbye. I mean, just watch the movie about the horse soldiers, and one of the scenes was, the dad having to say goodbye to his son and his wife, and those are always really difficult situations. Probably, I still categorize that, quite honestly, as the hardest thing that I've done in my life.
How so?
Just look, having to say goodbye, to, the one person on this earth that you love enough to, make that lifetime commitment to, and to be married to, and I had a daughter who was just a few months old at that point in time, and to say goodbye and know what they're going to be dealing with over the next several months, year, whatever, and understanding, kind of the pain and strain that they might have to go through, along with, what we were about to step into and the responsibilities that we had to, our country and to them at the same time. And there's just a lot of conflict there with respect to kind of, owning those responsibilities and living up to, the standards that we had for ourselves as they say young Marine officers, but back then we were a little older, a lot older now. But, and I think in particular, though, it was probably a little more difficult for me just because I had some sense that, I might not come home. And I kind of, was introduced to my own mortality, I think, in that, I was in New York on September 11th, and I spent several days down at Ground Zero, seeing firsthand what had happened. And I called my new bride at that point in time and said, hey, we're going to go away. And you need to prepare yourself. And in that process, I needed to prepare myself. And, I believe that God put me there with the expectation and the knowledge that, so that I could see firsthand, what happened and understand why I was going and what we were doing. But while I was there, I did a lot of prayer. And, I kept saying, hey, listen, please, God, first, help us find somebody alive. That was my first prayer. But I also kept asking, hey, if you're going to take me away, please give, my new young bride, the somebody that loves her as much as I do. And I prayed that over and over during my time down at Ground Zero. And, sure enough, the first prayer didn't get answered, but the second prayer did. Because my wife was pregnant within just a few weeks after me getting home from New York, and I took that as a real message from God that, hey, you're going somewhere, and the question was, all right, God, I know what I meant when I said take me away, but okay, what did you mean? Because I'd really like to understand that now. So right? I appreciate the answered prayer. I love it. But what does that mean, and what's going to happen? Yeah. And so I just had this sense, and I didn't know if that was, hey, you're going to take me away for this period of time, or you're going to take me away permanently. So
it's different than packing for a business trip. I mean, it's a open-ended ticket, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
But did you do anything to prep? I mean, a lot of guys talk about the Dear John letter or the, in case I don't make it back. Did you write any of those or prep anything before you left?
I didn't, I certainly had the conversation and I, just reading, historically, and the Marine Corps does a great job of kind of making you do that and understand, our predecessors and where they came from and how they managed things. And it just seemed to me that when you acknowledge that, hey, you're not coming home, those are the guys that don't come home. And, so it becomes prophetic, and I didn't want that prophecy to be, kind of hanging over. So I didn't do that preparation. I did do things like, take out extra life insurance policies and those sorts of things. Right. But I think that's prudent preparation, right, as opposed to kind of setting a prophecy on kind of what's going to happen. So, I did the right things, put in God's hands, and, trusted him.
What did you do? I mean, I was coming to your command at that time on that deployment. And I let my daughter shave my head before I went because I wanted a good clean haircut. And I remember Katie dropping me off. But did you do anything for the drop off? I mean, what was that? How did you wrap that moment up? Because I think a lot of people, they see the pictures of, the dad coming into the school, right, and the kid getting up and everybody cries, or the baseball game where they sneak the dad out on the field. And those are cool, and it's great to celebrate that. But these are meant to be stories of real life, just everyday Marines and sailors and soldiers and leaving. Did you do anything special for the drop off? I mean, you have this emotional grip. You had prayer a lot. Your wife now has a new baby, in the arms. But then how do you take that step and get on the plane, right? Or get on the bus and leave? I mean, did you do anything to prep for that?
There were a couple of things that I did kind of the beforehand, because, my daughter was so young at that point in time. She was, I think, 6 months old, something of that nature. So I actually did a videotape of me reading books. So, Cat in the Hat and, Green Eggs and Ham and Dr. Seuss's ABCs and Little Miss Spider. And I videotaped probably, well over a couple hours of me reading books so that, my wife at the time could play those for Michaela so that she could hear my voice and see me and recognize me. So, that from a preparation standpoint, when I got dropped off at the airport, Jennifer got dropped off by someone who was the daughter of a Marine. So, I wanted her to have kind of that, that closeness because, we were reservists, and like she was the only person that was gone. I mean, she didn't have a community on base, right? So there was, you live out in kind of the civilian sector, and there aren't a lot of us out there, right? And the support network is very distant. She was in North Carolina. The vast majority of my company was in California. And, so that created another, sense of distance. So I wanted to be able to try to do that. So somebody did. But, ultimately, from a preparation standpoint, I'm not sure there's much you can do. I mean, it's a very emotional moment. And, kind of that last hug and saying goodbye. And, we did have the opportunity to call, before we got on the airplane in California as well. I left North Carolina, went to California, and from there, but I had the opportunity to call. But, look, I remember just like trying to, say goodbye. It's hard. I mean, I honestly felt physically like someone was choking me. I couldn't get the air over my vocal cords, to say goodbye. It was too. And again, kind of that that answered prayer was on my mind too, right? So, so it was really difficult. I remember somebody walking up outside of my office as I was, trying to say that last goodbye at 3:00 in the morning in California time, and them kind of I don't know if it was you or the XO or who it was, but whoever it was had the courtesy enough to kind of give me a little space when I needed it. But
yeah, well, then it wasn't.
Truly the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. No, it's a tough moment. And I think about all the vets who've had to struggle with that and then take that action. And I think, a unique experience in the military, right? Because most other things, like, something awful could happen to you on a business trip, I guess. But, your ticket is round trip, your hotels are booked, where you're eating, you're sleeping, you're driving your car. I mean, you have all that stuff. The moment you're talking about is a much bigger step, and yet, like, why go? I mean, you had 160 something Marines in your charge ish. We had a mission we didn't necessarily understand, but yet you still pick up and go. So why go? I mean, why? You're wearing the uniform, you have that obligation, but how do you reconcile that to step across what we call the line of departure?
Yeah, there's that struggle and that pull because, look, and is it a choice? In many ways you can say it's an obligation, but, I loved my family. I still love my family very much, but, I loved the Marines that served with me. And, I love my country, and you do things, that's, look, if we have, that's the strongest motivator in the world is love, right? So, the thing that you're talking about is the conflict between, the love that you have for your family and the love that you have for your country and the Marines that you're serving with. And, that, does that come in conflict? Yeah. Is it a painful conflict? You bet. And, it doesn't change the fact that the reality is that that's what drives us in all of those things. So, look, I wanted to come home to my family, and but I had 191 Marines that really wanted to come home to their families as well. And, I had a commitment that I needed to meet and wanted to meet, because look, this as well as I do. Look, I pray every night that there's no war. We've experienced it. We don't like it. It all sucks, right?
Right.
But when there is one, look, I think I'm a great leader. I think you're a great leader. And when it comes down to it, those young Marines need great leaders too. And they need guys who are committed and love them just as much as, their families love them to bring them home and to do everything they can within their power and within, their training and with the discipline and the expertise that they've got to do everything they can to bring them home. So why do you do it? Why do you go through that struggle? That's why, and they deserve it. Those families deserve it as well. So, in the end, that's what happens. That's why you do those things. So,
no, I think you're right, and it is tough to pick up and go. I mean, you think about all the Marines we've seen, the soldiers, the airmen, everybody who deploys and steps off. I mean, I think part of it is recognizing that, living who you are meant to be, or committing to yourself to be honest with who you are, becomes more important than the risk. Like for me, and I had a mentor who told me before a deployment, he's like, if you don't go and you don't go out there, then you'll always blame everything else in your life as the reason why you weren't able to be what makes you special. So go, go and come back, and your family will be here. And if something awful happens, then we all deal with that. But, until then, be honest to yourself. Anyway, for me, that was helpful for subsequent deployments. So we don't have a ton of time, but I love this whole idea of you go so you can come home kind of thing that you mentioned. And I think that's the point of a lot of these. First, I did manage to find, I found a couple cool photos. That's actually one of your crews in Iraq outside of Duwania. There was a giant, we used to call it paper mache. I don't know, some kind of model of a rifle, AK. Hilarious. So we all took pictures just out in the desert right outside the gate to this little camp. But I don't know if you've seen that one, but that's your all the CAT section leaders there from your command. I thought that was kind of cool, fun. And it's ironic, actually, because I see Pongo on there. Thanks for the comments. Great to see you too, buddy. He was a Lance Corporal and a driver in your command at the time. So thanks for joining us today, Pongo. And then
what up, Pongo?
That's right. Your crew made it back. We had a chance, 2 years ago now, I guess, to get together. And so that is all the guys in that original picture. Minus the staff sergeant, and we had a doc instead, but had a chance to get together and strap on some old uniforms and take the same photo again. So I just wanted to share that too. All those smiling faces with a few more gray and a few more wrinkles. But the big one for me is and Pongo, I agree with you in your comment. It's an important discussion. All of it is important. I wish we had more time. We could talk about some of the funniest moments, as long as they weren't about me, and the hard things, the scary things, the heart touching things, the most human events, that kind of thing. So if you're out there and you're a veteran of any service on any deployment, send me a note. I mean, we want to create in this Battlefield to the Boardroom group just a place to tell your story. Mike, thank you for sharing your story about loading up and stepping into life almost. You didn't know what you were going towards, but I think, you have things in your life that were already built. You had a wife, you had a kid, you had a job, you had all this stuff figured out, and then everything got derailed and pulled off track, and you had an obligation to the 190 lives you're talking about. And then you have to reconcile that, and you do that through prayer and reflection, and you do that through a lot of other vehicles, but you stepped into life by accepting the call and doing what you felt your duty was, which I think is amazing. And we want to hear those stories. So if you're out there, shoot me a message. We'll get you a link. We'll get you on. Mike, thanks for your service and thanks for coming on. But most importantly, especially on this video thing, welcome home, buddy. Thanks. I'm glad you're with us today and in the future.
All right. We'll continue to be part of the Mutual Admiration Society and appreciate your service and your time and commitment and your leadership as well. Thank you.
Love it, brother. See you.
Semper Fi.